How's it going, everyone? For this episode, I visited Death Valley National Park in California's Mojave Desert. Known for its record-breaking heat, this vast region's diverse terrain and dark skies also provide amazing opportunities for landscape photography, both day and night. I experienced some challenges during this trip, mostly weather-related. Yeah, so this heat can go kick rocks. But I ended up with several photos that I'm pretty happy with. So join me as I capture the beauty of this rugged, otherworldly landscape. So I just made it to Death Valley National Park. I'm kind of in a backcountry camping spot for vehicles instead of backpackers. I just wanted to put my little card on the post there, and now that I'm checked in, I'm going to head on over to Badwater Basin to scout for a location for Milky Way photography with those hexagonal salt crystals in the foreground. So I'm going to head on over there tonight, and then after that I was going to hit up Zabriskie Point, and I saw a location that might make a good composition for a Milky Way photo once the Milky Way core rises a little bit more. I kind of written off Zabriskie Point as a Milky Way photography location. I don't really know why, but then I saw a photo from my friend Andrew, who I met at the Alabama Hills the other day, and he showed me a photo of his and really inspired me to do my own little take on it. So that's the plan for tonight. I left my campsite at Hole in the Wall Road and made the drive to Badwater Basin. Now, Death Valley is huge. It's the 5th largest national park in the US and the largest park in the lower 48 states. So naturally, it does take a bit of driving to get from one location to another. Anyway, I eventually made it to the parking lot and started the hike westward. Of course, I can't feature Badwater Basin without also mentioning that it's home to the lowest point of elevation in North America. The further away I walked from the parking lot, the more apparent the salt formations became. After hiking for about a mile, I came across some reasonably prominent salt polygons. I explored the area a bit and then pinned the general location on Google Maps so I could find my way back at night. I then hiked back to the car and drove back to the campsite to get some sleep. Later that night, I made my way back to Badwater Basin. My main goal was to capture a panorama of the Milky Way over the Black Mountains with the salt formations in the foreground. I'm at Badwater Basin right now. It's a little windy, but otherwise the conditions are pretty good. I just finished up a pano. It was pretty involved. I had to do some focus stacking for each rotation. I'm not very experienced with panos, so hopefully it'll pan out. Apologies for the panoramic humor, but pan out it did. I'm pretty happy with how this image turned out overall. If I tried this shot again though, I would probably stand in a different position amongst the salt formations, and I'd prefer it if they were a bit more prominent as well. Otherwise, I really like this photo. The Milky Way perfectly arches over the Black Mountains, which is exactly what I was going for. As I mentioned in the field, it was a fairly involved process collecting all of the frames for this image. I did focus stacking for each of the foreground panels and noise reduction stacking for each of the sky panels. I then stitched everything in PT GUI to create the final image. Despite the heavy wind, it was otherwise a beautiful night, and I definitely had to take a few minutes just to do some stargazing. Next, I'm going to do some single frames. Might have to do some focus stacking and maybe some noise reduction stacking with those as well. But yeah, we'll see what I come up with. I captured this image first. I like the detail in the foreground coupled with the celestial beauty of the Milky Way. Again, I did a focus stack for the foreground and a noise reduction stack for the sky. Next, I captured a similar image with similar techniques, but in a landscape orientation instead of portrait. I like the foreground details of the portrait image better, but I think I prefer the overall feel of this image more. The original plan was to hit up Zabriskie Point on the way back to the campsite, but with twilight approaching, I decided to head back directly to camp to get some rest. The next morning I did some general exploration of the park. First up, I did a bit of hiking in Golden Canyon. They filmed a scene for Star Wars here. Next up was the Artist's Palette. They filmed a couple of scenes for Star Wars here as well. I then drove through 20 Mule Team Canyon. They filmed a scene for Return of the Jedi here. I like Star Wars, in case you couldn't tell. I then visited Mosaic Canyon. Definitely a beautiful location, but as far as I know, they didn't film any scenes for Star Wars here. Afterwards, I checked out the Devil's Golf Course. They didn't film any Star Wars scenes here, which feels like a shame because this location felt the most extraterrestrial. I ended up returning here for a Milky Way shot later at night. But first it was time to take some photos at the Mesquite Flat sand dunes. Currently walking to the sand dunes at Death Valley. I'm gonna try to go for some sunset shots. The dunes sort of backlit. I think that could add some drama. I gotta be quick because the sun's gonna set really soon. Forgot to bring water. It's kind of stupid. I really wish I had a still suit right now. Whew. Now I think this first image is pretty nice. I like the textures in the sand, the zigzagging shape of the ridge, and the contrast between the light and the dark sides of the dune. I gave the highlights a bit of warmth and applied some cooling to the shadows, which I think adds a pleasing contrast to the colors as well. If I had a critique of this image, it would be that the center ridge acts as a leading line to not a whole lot. It would have been great if there were a prominent dune in the background, or if I just walked over and stood at the end of the ridge. That said, I still feel like the foreground dune is a strong enough subject on its own, so I still like this image overall. I then broke out the telephoto lens and took some shots at 400mm. I really like the colors and shading in this shot. Again, I applied some warmth to the highlights and coolness to the shadows. I also like the shape of the dunes as well. However, there's just a bit too much going on here. The various elements in this photo don't complement each other as well as they could, and the lines feel a bit disorderly and chaotic. This next photo is definitely cleaner and makes for a better image overall. That said, I do wish that I gave the top of the main dune a bit more negative space. It's a bit close to the edge, which creates some visual tension. Not a huge deal, but I probably should have recomposed the image or even zoomed out a bit. Luckily, I took another shot in portrait orientation, which I then cropped into a square aspect ratio. I gave the top of the dune a bit more headroom, which I think creates a more balanced image and gets rid of that visual tension. I'm really happy with the final result of this photo. I like its simplicity and balance, and I like how the warmth of the dunes contrasts with the coolness of the background. On the hike back to the car, I shot this image. I like how the base of the photo is out of focus, which encourages the viewer to move their eyes up towards the subject. I also like how the dunes are sandwiched between the shrubs on the bottom and the hazy mountainside at the top. It gives the dunes a nice framing and creates visual layers in the image. I also like how the texture of the mountain in the background feels a bit abstract with these almost swirly looking patterns. It reminds me of photos of Jupiter that were taken by the Juno spacecraft and kind of gives the image an otherworldly feel. Okay, short but sweet. I think I got a couple of okay images. Nothing on the level of Michael Shainbloom, but I got a long ways to go before I'm on his level at anything. But yeah, for my level, I think I got a couple of okay images. Yeah, so this heat can go kick rocks. Sun's already set and it's still probably about 90 degrees. I think the next time I come here, it'll be during the winter. Yeah. After a bit of sleep at the campsite, I made my way to the Devil's Golf Course where I took this photo. There were a few other people there, so I didn't bother doing any vlogging. But yes, in this image, I really like the jagged, alien-looking texture of the foreground and how it contrasts with the more delicate qualities of the sky. For the foreground, I did some focus stacking to make sure the terrain was sharp from front to back. Also, given how dark this patch of land was, I did some noise reduction stacking to help clean things up a bit. For the sky, I did a 4-exposure noise reduction stack as well. Later that night, I made my way to Zabriskie Point. The conditions there were pretty miserable, to be honest. The wind was extremely gusty, and there were a bunch of clouds blocking the Milky Way. Luckily, I was able to wait it out a bit and ended up with this image. The clouds are still fairly prominent, but at least they cleared up around the Milky Way. And yeah, I like this image overall. Like the previous photo, I like the contrast between the rocky terrain and the ethereal sky. If I have a critique, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of synergy in this image. The top and bottom halves feel fairly partitioned from each other. I think landscape photos tend to look better if part of the foreground extends into the sky, which isn't really happening here. I think it would have been better if I had walked closer to the Badlands and made them a more prominent subject in the photo. I'll just have to give that a try the next time I visit Death Valley. In terms of technique, I did a tracked noise reduction stack for the sky and a 2-exposure noise reduction stack for the foreground. As I mentioned before, the conditions were rather unpleasant, so after capturing my exposures, I scurried back to the car where I did some reflecting on the experience I just had. I'm here at the Zabriskie Point parking lot where the conditions were both cloudy and windy tonight. The clouds weren't even really the biggest problem. They mostly cleared up around the Milky Way as the night progressed. I think they actually even added a little drama and mystery and atmosphere to the image. It was really the wind that was causing problems. At the Devil's Golf Course, things were pretty calm, but here at Zabriskie, totally different story. I tried to shield my camera as much as possible from the wind, but I still had a few exposures with some camera shake on them. I did multiple exposures, so I still think I have something that I can work with, but that's fewer exposures that I'm going to be able to use for noise reduction stacking. To illustrate this point, here's a raw file of one of the sky exposures. When we zoom in, we can see the effect that the wind had on the image, with the resulting camera shake being readily apparent in the stars. That makes this frame pretty much unusable. Thankfully, I had taken several exposures and had enough clean ones to create a partial noise reduction stack for the final image. Anyway, I think I'm going to head back to my campsite and get some sleep. Actually, on second thought, I hear the sunrises here are pretty nice. Maybe I'll stick around and take a time lapse to make up for tonight's disappointing Milky Way shoot. Okay, so that's gonna wrap things up. Overall, this was a good trip. I took some photos that I was happy with, but it was also a bit of a learning experience as well. I have to say I was pretty exhausted by the end, given the lack of sleep, the long drives, and the intense heat. In fact, the camera's going to accurately portray how I felt right about now. Yeah. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, get out there and take a shot in the dark.